Hello and welcome to the stream. I've just realised I forgot to move the second camera out of the way, so I was looking at that one for a second. Let's fix that before it becomes a problem. It is always fun to have chats about Leeds United's ownership. We've had a few nightmares in the past, and we will get to that in a little bit of time, which will apparently in the nearby future include Will Ferrell, which is quite fun. But there is one group that actually matters to Leeds United right now, and that is 49ers Enterprises, because they are I think, only current stakeholder in Leeds United, with various celebrities investing in them to invest in Leeds, which makes things a little bit more complex. So I figured if we need to care about the San Francisco 49ers, it would be good if the 49ers cared about us, and both sides really need to learn a little bit more about each other. So let's learn more with today's guest. It is Crystalscuor. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks so much for having me.
It's all right. So to explain how I know Crystal, we both work for DAZN, and I was going into some various NFL events, and I was like, "Hi, Crystal, help, please!" And that's where I learned the 49ers link, and I was like, "Oh, you know what? That's quite cool." And I learned that you also had a pretty big breakthrough with 49ers-y stuff. What's happened with that exactly? Because I don't know the specific details.
Okay, yeah. So I've been a 49ers fan for about 15 years now. My ex-boyfriend got me into it. We don't talk about him, so we're not going to spend any more breath on that. But I've kept the team and just kind of rolled with it. And obviously we'll probably get more into this, but the 2019 season was the last before this time we went to the Super Bowl that we went to the Super Bowl in my time as a fan. And obviously COVID happened not long after that. And I had been tweeting a lot about the 49ers during the Super Bowl and just kind of growing my brand online, specifically on Twitter. I'm a journalist by trade, so I do have my journalism degree and I do a lot of writing and stuff on my own. But during COVID, I just thought, you know what, let's be cheeky. Let's put some tweets out and just, talk about the team, tweet while the games are on, do all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of really grown my brand. And I'm originally from Canada. So obviously we don't have an NFL team there, but I sucked on to the 49ers and yeah, I've just been doing my thing. And recently I've been doing my own podcast as well. It's called the Crystal Ballin Podcast. And through that, I've been able to get approved to go cover a media event that is happening next week in California, in San Jose. So I'm really excited about that. And I'll be interviewing a couple of very legendary quarterbacks and talking to our current quarterback and everything. And they'll be honoring a player with the Dwight Clark Award. Dwight Clark is one of he's famous for the catch. If you ever look it up, it's against the Dallas Cowboys. It was in a playoff game, and he had the catch from Joe Montana, kind of took us to the Super Bowl and everything, and it was just absolutely smashing. So, yeah, he is the one that's this whole event is about, and we're honoring a player in honor of him. And the player is going to be a player that's currently on the team right now. I'll get to talk to him as well, and I'm just very excited because obviously they're my squad, and to be able to be in the presence of some of these players and actually do interviews live with them is amazing.
Huge,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So before we get into it, I know that what I will tend to do is say, before we get into it, I've just got one thing. Please subscribe, because I always do that, because why not? If you don't ask, you don't get. In this case, not to me. Subscribe to Crystal. I've popped a tag thing in the title, which is down there somewhere. It's in the description as well. Hop over that direction. Say hello. Crystal's really nice. Her stuff's really good. It's worth a visit. So the entire gist of this little bit of a chat is we're going to talk about Leeds, we're going to talk about the 49ers and how the two are significantly more linked than you might think in terms of histories and pasts and futures and how things are looking at the moment. Important note for you, Crystal, it's a very good thing that you mentioned that you're from Canada a minute ago, because last season we had an American manager who signed multiple American players. None of them are at the club anymore for some distinct reasons. So a lot of people have a strong dislike in that general direction, but it's not a problem for you. So first off, we are going to have a quick dive into the histories of the respective sides. From the Leeds side, the nicest way of putting it, and I've got a specific tag later on for the darker periods, which is 99% of it, is we were formed in 1919. Very old club, but not compared to a lot of football clubs in England. That's because in the First World War we may have slightly broken a law and paid our footballers, which led to the initial club, Leeds City, stopping existing. And then throughout the years, it was a bit bit crap for a long time. Then we came to what we know as the Riviera, which is where we run. You can tell I've been streaming for 2 hours before this.
Yeah.
Which is where we won all of the trophies that the club has had in its history, except for a little period in 1992. I think we most recently won the league, and since that, it's been okay into the early 2000s. And then then we're going to talk about the darker periods a little bit later. Oh boy, was there a darker period. So how exactly are the 49ers comparing? How's your dark to light ratio going at the moment?
Okay, well, at the moment, I would say there's definitely a lot of light. We haven't been able to bring it home and win a Super Bowl in the last 3 appearances that we've been there. So as my time as a fan, I have not witnessed a Super Bowl win. So the Super Bowl is obviously like the biggest thing that you can win that season. We've won a lot of NFC championship games. So if you look at the NFL overall, there's the NFC division, the National Football Club, or National Football
Championship?
Conference. No, conference.
Oh, conference.
I'm thinking championship. Now you got me talking about clubs. I'm like, oh no, National Football Conference, and then there's the AFC, the American Football Conference, and so it's divided into 2 sides, and each division has its own division within that. So we are in the NFC West. So in that division, we have 4 teams total. We are one of the 4, obviously, and then there's the Arizona Cardinals, the Seahawks, the Seattle Seahawks, which is actually the closest team to where I grew up. So I grew up around a lot of Seahawks fans, a lot of people always chirping me. And then the final one is the Los Angeles Rams. They're the one that has just won a Super Bowl recently. Not this past year, but they're the most out of our division. They're the one that won most recently. So we haven't had one in a while. It's been a journey. But the dark days, I would say, obviously we'll talk a little bit more about that. But 49ers overall, they're a very historical team. They've won 5 Super Bowls, which is up there. Tom Brady and the Patriots, I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're one of the teams that have won the most. Same with the Steelers. We're one of those ones still chasing number 6. So our history has a lot of, amazing moments. We had Joe Montana. He still is a very legendary quarterback for the team. His jersey's obviously been retired because that's how big of a deal he is. But yeah, back then the Niners were everything. They still are. And I think that the way that they played back then has carried over into each year forward. And there's a big legacy to withhold. And I mean, we're getting there. I would say we've been pretty close in the last 5 years. We've been to 4 NFC championship games, which is huge. We just haven't been able to win the Super Bowl though. So we're getting there.
At least you're in the conversation. You're in and around where you want to be at the moment.
We would still be, I'd say, top 5. If you look at the overall NFL, people put us in the top 5 just based on, our defense and our offense and everything. So historically, we've been better, but we're still one of the top dogs.
Yeah. You're still up there, roughly.
Yeah.
Baby Zebra in the comments says, A, hey, Crystal. And B, change of costume. I have changed into the away kit from this season because it's a banger. I mean, look at that.
It's beautiful.
It's fantastic.
How many jerseys do you have? I just want to ask.
Oh, that's a question. That's a question that might take me a couple of minutes to work out, so I will get to that at some point. Okay. Afternoon, Danny. How's it going? Hopefully quite well. So we've talked a little bit about the histories. Now we've got to talk about the less fun bits of the histories. Would you like to go through your darker period? We'll go with maybe a 10-year stint that wasn't especially fun. And I'll let you go first because I think we've got a banger. I think we might accidentally win this one.
So obviously, for me, you guys have relegation and all that, and that's not something that the NFL has to deal with, which thankfully, there's some years that we've had some rough years, and we don't know, maybe we would have gone down to the XFL, which is definitely, it's a league that doesn't even exist anymore, but it used to. And now, so we just have these 32.
Was that XFL? It's not the one that was run by Vince McMahon or something weird like that.
The Rock.
No, but I think the previous version was run by the guy that ran WWE at the time.
You might be right. I don't know much about it because it's not a league that I've ever wanted to really, invest my interest in and everything. But yeah, no, I think you might be right because then that's how maybe The Rock took it over because he ended up purchasing it and then the league went debunked and now it's the UFL, I believe. They've merged a bunch of ones. Yeah. It's this whole thing. So anyways, or maybe they would even go down to let's say if the NFL teams got relegated, they would maybe go to the CFL, which is the Canadian Football League. And don't ask me about that because I don't follow that league. It's terrible. We have a team in BC, but I just don't care for it. But we had actually a pretty dark age, I would guess, or dark I don't know about 10 years, but when I first became a fan, we obviously, just before that, we didn't have the greatest luck. So this is like, I'm looking at like the 2010 season, not the greatest. But prior to that, like we hadn't been to the playoffs. We hadn't been winning any kind of championship games, any of the NFC championship games, any playoff games. Like there's been nothing. So after I started following, basically we started to go on a bit of a run, which is very exciting for me, because when I started following, everyone was like, well, why are you following that team? They're not that great right now. You know, they have the storied franchise, but at the moment they're just not doing that great. But I came aboard on the 49ers bandwagon, and they started winning, and we had a quarterback. His name was Alex Smith. He wasn't the greatest. He ended up getting injured. And then a guy that we had drafted that we didn't know what he was going to be like, his name is Colin Kaepernick. He actually made headlines for a lot of other things that he's done politically and everything, but we're not going to focus on that. He took over the team, and then he kind of brought, you know, this light back into it. So when I started following, it was like, yeah, playoffs, all this stuff. But then after Kaepernick ended up having kind of a drop off and everything, we had some pretty trashy seasons. So I want to say it was like 2014 season up until maybe 2018, 2019. 2019 was the year that we ended up losing the Super Bowl. But yeah, the 2014 season, we just had a terrible manager. We had this guy called Chip Kelly was after him. Jim Tomsula, he was terrible. So he was the coach of the team at the time. We had Jim Harbaugh as well, which now he actually is back in the NFL, but with a different team. So we kind of just went through like this not so great. Nothing was happening. It was like, I want to say the worst record that we had was 2 wins and 14 losses, which was terrible. There was another season just before we went to the Super Bowl. We had 4 wins and 12 losses. So it was like, you know, we just didn't know what was going to go on with the team. I stayed faithful to it. I know they show pictures sometimes, especially some of our rival teams will show pictures of Levi Stadium or our old stadium, Candlestick Park, and show how empty it was and everything when we had a bit of a downfall. So wasn't the greatest, but we stick through it, you know, because we had that storied, you know, legendary quarterbacks, all these championship wins. So of course we thought, you know what, the Niners aren't that team that's ever going to lose forever. Like they just, So, I mean, then
they'll bounce back. They are a big enough side to sort of come back.
Yeah, exactly. So we hired Kyle Shanahan. He's our coach currently right now. He's actually had a couple extensions in there, and he's just a guy that kind of took the garbage and turned it into gold. And yeah, he's just been pretty phenomenal. I know he's got obviously some people, they don't believe that he's the greatest dude because he hasn't been able to get us the championship win. But I think he took a team that was completely disheveled and he's turned them into a bunch of superstars on the team. And yeah, it's not as dark as it used to be for sure. But that being said, I could kind of play devil's advocate and say, you know, if you don't win the big game, is it really like, can you really count it as a winning season? Right. So, I mean, I'm hopeful. I think we were this close. Like we went to the Super Bowl this past year. We lost to the Chiefs. They're on a run to potentially do a 3-peat this coming season. So I would argue that obviously watching your team lose 3 times in the time that I've been a fan, it's not great. That would be the darkest of the fandom for me. But I'd still rather get to those championship games and be a contender than have seasons where you're 2-14. You know what I mean? So we've definitely come out of the dark.
Okay, so this bit, I'm gonna have to ask the chat to correct me if I'm wrong for lots of it, because you won't believe when I say that there is potential to say libelous things, but it was a bad time. So, I was born in 1998, which means that my earlier football memories are around 2003, 2004. Immediately before this, like 2000, 2002-ish, we are like big side in the Champions League. And our owner is spending a hell of a lot of money on the assumption that we are going to stay in the Champions League because the Champions League is lots and lots of revenue. We didn't do that, which meant that suddenly we were paying out a hell of a lot more money than we could afford to be paying out. And we, over a period of time, went into administration, which meant that we got relegated from the Premier League, which is okay, that happens. And often you can bounce right back up. We got into the playoffs in our first season after that, which I think I've explained to you is a little mini tournament where the winner of that gets promoted. Didn't win that. And that is the start of the playoff-related trauma and a very, very, very bad time for the club. around this time, the club becomes owned by a man called Ken Bates. Ken Bates is, sorry, this is a good point. CEO, not owner. We used to be publicly listed. So it wasn't even his money that he was wasting. Ken Bates is renowned for being a little bit of a penny pincher. And throughout this period, would not spend much money. And since we were still in like financial issues, we got a 10-point deduction from the league because it's to make sure that clubs are run financially properly. This relegates us to League One, the third division, which, as a very recent Premier League club, is like, oh dear, this isn't good. Let's rebuild. Not only that, but good old Ken decided, you know what I'm going to do? We're still under financial investigation. I think it would be a fantastic idea if we didn't comply with it. Which led to another 15-point deduction the next season.
Oh, no.
So we're in League One, and this 15-point deduction, we are winning week on week on week on week, but because of this deduction, we don't get promoted. We're in the playoffs.
Oh, boy.
How do we do in the playoffs? Not very well. We lose. And I can't remember which season that was. It was, I think... Was that the season we actually got to the playoff final at Wembley and didn't win? It might have been. Either way, there's a lot of playoff-related trauma for us. Shortly after this, we do get promoted because we've not got any horrific points deductions. We win in the FA Cup over Manchester United, who are our biggest rivals because it's historically based in Yorkshire, Lancashire. It was Doncaster in the playoff final. Thank you very much. There's a big rivalry going on there, and we get promoted, and it's brilliant, and we're back in the Championship. And that year, we keep on pushing, and we're doing quite well. And then we have what a lot of people like to call the wilderness years, which is the reason I almost entirely dropped off of football. Because Ken Bates sold the club to a Middle Eastern consortium called, I think it was GFH at that point, who didn't put any money in and were, for example, asking popular club podcasts who the club should sign rather than making decisions themselves, which is not good.
Yeah.
And then eventually they sold the club to someone called Massimo Cellino. I don't know how to describe the Cellino era without accusing him of a lot of things. We got to the point where he was being chased around the car park by an angry bunch of fans, and there were widespread rumours of some rather illicit substances in boardrooms, which led to what can only... He also likes sacking managers quite a lot. The extent of the rate he would sack managers and hire ones that weren't quite good enough for the job was he hired, I think it's a guy called Dave Hockaday that I'm specifically thinking of, who was in the job for a few weeks, very clearly not qualified for the job, to the extent that he's now a PE teacher.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so he wasn't quite set for the job.
Yeah. It's like hiring me, basically.
Yeah, it's like hiring one of us to do things you need to be competent to do.
Yeah.
He did also do that when he was in the process of buying the club. He sacked a manager he technically didn't have the right to sack yet, which was fun. And then he sold the club to a man called Andrea Radrizzani. We have a brief positive moment here because in his second season, we sign a manager called Marcelo Bielsa, and it's wonderful. He's far too good for us. Gets us promoted at his second attempt, although the first attempt was bad because we went out in the playoffs again after leading 2-0 with 45 minutes left.
Oh, no. Sad.
Yeah, we lost 4-3, and the worst bit is I didn't get to watch any of it because I was out at a six-a-side game at the time. So I go out to this football match in such a good mood, and then my team lose 8-1, and then Leeds end up losing 4-3. That was against Derby, yeah, who are rivals in the way that we had a season of hating them. This happens a lot. So that happens. That's all well and good. We are in the Premier League, but we have a little bit of a downturn under Marcelo Bielsa, who eventually gets sacked because we're at risk. We sign a guy called Jesse Marsh, who I mentioned earlier, who was not a good manager in the slightest. Played people in the wrong places, played daft tactics, and we are now in the Championship, arguably because of Jesse Marsh. And here we are. I don't know if we're currently in a dark period or a light period. I think it'll probably be fine, though. I think we're on the climb up again after a bit
You
of a
think
blip.
so?
I hope so, because
Yeah.
I
So
don't
how does
think I
this
can
go?
take much more dark.
Give me a little preview of what you think's going to happen.
I think my little preview. I think the 49ers/49ers Enterprises. This is a good point as well. We went through 4 managers last season. In a
That's a lot, obviously.
Oh, it is in a 5-month period. But yeah, the way I see it is the 49ers are in a position where they have invested quite a lot of their own money and like investor money into the club. And whilst we're in the championship, they ain't making a profit. So they will be happy to take short-term spends to sort of get that boost to the Premier League, and then that will sort of grow from there, is my thinking of what will happen. But around...
happy to help.
Yeah, that'll do, yeah. So around the 49ers, what's the vibe right now? What's the sort of feeling? Is it good feelings? Are we optimistic? Are we pessimistic? Do we hate ourselves, which I'm a bit too familiar with at this club?
You know what? I still am recovering, I think, from the Super Bowl loss. I'm not going to lie. This was, like I said before, it's the 3rd one that I've witnessed as a fan. And I think that there's a lot of fans that are just very frustrated at the moment. Of course, like you get to the playoffs and it's exciting. And there's like this every year you just build up to, we got to get back to the championship game. We got to, and we do make it back, 3 times in the last 10 years. But I mean, 11 years now it's been. But yeah, it's a frustration. I think as soon as the season starts, we get on a roll. The team's doing really well. Obviously, like things are hyped up again. You get, win after win after win. We had like 5 in a row at one point, and it's exciting, and so you feel like you can't lose. But then you do have some games where like you're like, okay, maybe we don't have enough. Maybe we can't beat Patrick Mahomes, who's the best quarterback in the league by far. I'm an optimistic person to a fault. I think that no matter what the team does and what they throw at me, I will always be there cheering them on. And I've been blessed to be able to see, in the last 5 years, actually, 4 really good seasons. And of course, you want to see them take the whole thing home at the end, but your team's still playing in the postseason. You still have a lot to be excited about in January and February in the colder months, where other teams are all sitting on their butts at home watching those teams play in the playoffs. And I think that I'm very lucky to be able to experience that constantly with the 49ers. We're always in the postseason. We're always in the NFC Championship game, which is one of the biggest ones, obviously, before the Super Bowl. And so to see your guys there and to see these, superstars come together, and we're keeping the same squad for the most part going into this next season. So we have a young franchise quarterback. They're going to pay him probably really big after next season if he plays amazing, like we know he can. He's actually the quarterback I get to interview when I go next week to the event. So really excited. His name's Brock Purdy. The cool thing about him is that, so we had kind of fumbled the bag a little bit in the NFL draft a couple of years back. I think it was 2021. We had drafted Trey Lance. And so we had, traded up to pick this guy. No, it was 2020. Sorry, 2020 season. We traded up to get this guy, and he didn't end up working out the way that we thought he was going to work out. He didn't have a lot of experience in college, and that's really crucial in order to get into the NFL and be able to just get on the ground and play. When we did start him one of the years, he got an injury in the second game of the season. So really, really terrible timing. We threw back in our other guy, Jimmy Garoppolo. He actually took us to a Super Bowl in 2019. And he ended up getting injured halfway through the season as well. So we were kind of at this point where we're like, we don't know what to do. We've got this 3rd string quarterback, Brock Purdy, who we drafted with the final pick of the draft in 2022. I was at Vegas and I watched the draft live. I saw them call his name, and they call, I don't know if you know this, but the last pick of the draft, no matter what number you are, each year there's obviously a different amount of draftees that go in.
Am I right in thinking it's Mr. Irrelevant or something?
Yes, you are, yeah. So he was Mr. Irrelevant, the final pick in the draft. And fun fact, there's actually never been another quarterback that has had the success that Brock Purdy has had as a Mr. Irrelevant. All the Mr. Irrelevants in the draft, for the most part, those guys don't see field time. They don't ever really get to play. There's, I think, a handful of guys that have been a Mr. Irrelevant that have been a difference maker for their team. And so we threw him in, and we're like, this is the last pick of the draft. A lot of people missed on this kid. And he took us to a friggin' NFC Championship game that season. he played phenomenally around all the superstar players, and people call him like a game manager where he just dinks and dunks. He uses his guys and just does easy plays in order to get down the field, which I would argue, yeah, he can do that at times, but he also knows how to throw the long bombs and everything. So I think there's a lot of hope for this team because he's such a young quarterback, because we haven't spent anything on him. In the last 2 seasons that he started, we've been to an NFC championship game and we've been to a Super Bowl. So pretty big. I feel like we haven't had that quarterback since the time I've been a fan. We haven't had that guy where you feel this much hope. And I know that I echo a lot of the people around the 49ers faithful. That's what we call ourselves. I think a lot of people feel very hopeful knowing that we have this guy that we're building a team around, and we will continue to build around him. We have superstars that are on contracts that are probably coming to an end. We won't be able to keep them all forever. But I do think that they're picking some pretty good, especially this past draft, they picked some good young kids who have had the experience in college that will make up for what we've been lacking, I think. And that's, being able to find those hidden gems in the draft that end up being guys that start for your team down the road.
Yeah. Just so everyone's on the same page, if you pop your questions in the chat, I will get to them towards the end. We've got a couple more topicy bits to cover, but there will be much wider chattiness. But this is a good point. The Super Bowl is basically the playoff final with a dance at halftime. That seems about right, to be fair, from what I saw of the Super Bowl. So we know roughly how the vibe is with the 49ers. With us, it's a mix of optimistic and terrified. I have gotten a lot of pelters on YouTube for being one of the more optimistic people, for being of the opinion that it'll be fine no matter what. We'll still have a team even if we don't get promoted. It'll still be fun. But how do people outside your team see your team? And I'm gonna sort of kick off with Leeds on this one because I feel like we've got a pretty big claim on this one. There is a song that is sung in almost every single football stadium in the country. Sorry, counting. A simple 5 words. We all hate Leeds scum is a good way of putting it. We're very popular. That originated in the club being known as Dirty Leeds in the 1960s, 1970s. We were in that period. We were quite kicky, but in the years since, that reputation has sort of held because in that period we formed a lot of rivalries with a lot of people that have sort of lessened for us, but are still really firmly held for other sides. Admittedly, we're not as kind as we can be to some other teams. Sorry, I've just seen Tony's message. I'm not scared of the playoffs. I have a lot of beer in the fridge. I respect it. Fair enough.
My man. Yeah.
So how was the feeling with the 49ers? Are we optimistic? Are we sort of on the fence? I've gone for the wrong question there.
I was going to say, I just said this.
Yeah, we've done that one. Yeah, how outside of the 49ers are the 49ers seen?
Okay, so they call us the 40 whiners. A lot of people around the league, they say that we whine. We want the refs to get calls for us, and the players are always, playing. We don't get certain calls that we should get, and I just think there's a lot of teams. So for me, there's a couple really big rivals, and these are teams that every season we have to play them twice. So that's those ones I was talking to you about in the in the NFC West. So the Seattle Seahawks, the LA Rams, and the Arizona Cardinals. For us, the two out of those, it's the LA Rams and the Seahawks that are the bigger rivals. Cardinals, I feel like, we're not so crazy. So I think their fans are pretty genuine with us. I've never seen anything really kick off about them because they just haven't been good for a while. And I just think that they don't even bother competing with us, and it just is what it is. They're like our little brother. You know what I mean? So the Seahawks are one that, in my time as a fan, they have just been the absolute worst fan base to deal with. Anytime we play them, I feel like it's just I have to put so many things on mute on my Twitter because I can't even deal with it. The Rams, every now and then when they start to get good in the season, those fans hate us too. They say, because we've beat them so many times. There was a few seasons that we ended up sweeping them. So we had 8 or 9 games in a row that we beat them, and they just weren't able to beat us until they beat us in the NFC Championship game. And that same season, the LA Rams ended up going and winning the Super Bowl. So for us, that hurt, I think, a lot more. And we can't really talk trash to them because they have a ring way before, we do in the last however many years. I think it's been 25 years. So we can't really talk. But for us, historically, there's the Cowboys fans And the Dallas Cowboys in general, they're just a team that they hate us. They absolutely hate us. All their fans hate us. We've always beat them in the playoffs recently, so I can understand why their fans can't stand us, because we're very cheeky and we get on there and say, F the Cowboys. Like, it's every year. One of our players, like, just so you know how big of a rivalry it is, one of our players, George Kittle, he's a tight end. He's amazing. He gets out on the field after we beat the Cowboys. I think we beat them like 42-13 or 17 or something like this, and like completely steamrolled them. They had no breath.
Yeah.
And they're a good team. But we always beat them. Always kick them out of the playoffs. Like, it's just great. Anyways, after that game, George Kittle lifts up his jersey and he's wearing a shirt that says F Dallas on it. So it's fantastic. The rivalry's always been there. I feel like the players that currently play, even though they weren't a part of the rivalry back then, like, they keep going strong with it now. Their fans absolutely hate us. I think there's a lot of fan bases that can't stand us, especially the ones this past season, because we had Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. They think, oh, this quarterback, he can't do anything. He's not as good as my quarterback, And one of those examples is Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. We ended up destroying them as well. And like, they were a team that last year they beat us in the NFC Championship game and they went on to the Super Bowl, but then they lost to the Chiefs. So we finally got our revenge and we're able to beat them this past season. And I just think there's a lot of people that they look at what we have, all the star players that we have. And like, if they don't show up in a game, they're always smack talking us. They're always saying, oh, like, you pay this guy this much money and look at what he did in the Super Bowl. Look at what he did in the NFC Championship game. Like, absolutely nothing. So I think there's a lot of people that are just jealous. I think, they see our storied franchise that is able to get to the big games and everything. And there's teams that haven't been able to do that for a long time. And we're able to do it with a quarterback that on paper shouldn't be doing what he's doing. So I think it's a jealousy thing. Yeah. But like, there's definitely a lot of people around the league that don't like the 49ers. That being said, I think there's a lot of teams that we don't even play often that they have a mutual respect for them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a few teams that we played this past season, like the Cincinnati Bengals, for example. They beat us in that game, but their fan base was awesome. We played the Detroit Lions in one of our playoff games. That's actually the reason that it was the NFC Championship game. So beating them ended up sending us to the Super Bowl. And their fans were fantastic. It wasn't this thing where we're being cheeky against them because we've always been playing them. I didn't have anything to say to them, and their fans were really great to us. So I feel like there's probably like 7 or 8 teams that cannot stand us and their fan bases cannot stand us. But aside from that, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. CB says, I'm not scared of the playoffs. I have 3 psychiatrists on speed dial. And Hill Football has a point that I forgot to bring up. Chelsea is a football club a very long way from us. Several hundred miles. However, we have quite a zesty rivalry with them that I forgot to mention. I'm going to read a couple of brief lines from the Wikipedia page because it's a rivalry so intense. There's a Wikipedia page. One of our earliest matches against them, such was the fearsome tackling on display, Chelsea had to make 7 changes to their lineup for the next match. Leeds had a reputation for being dirty. We matched them in a physical manner. One of our players, called Jack Charlton, had a black book of players he intended to exact revenge on, and God. 2 different Chelsea players
Ryan.
worked with them.
Have you ever watched The Office?
I have, yeah.
Ryan from The Office, he keeps a little black book. That's literally him.
Imagine that, but more violence is, I think, the best way of putting it. Rivalry was fueled by the traditional north-south divide. Let's have another quick read, because there was one specific match that I have completely had slip my mind. There we go. The animosity continued in the 1970s. There was a 0-0 draw at Chelsea Stadium in 1971 that at times, and this is a direct quote, more resembled some mafia vendetta than football.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's
so it's a bit more hectic than the NFL rivalries, I think.
A touch. It's settled down a bit in the years since. A bit, not enough. But it's definitely settled. Good afternoon, Colin. Hope you're doing well. Baby Zebra likes your accent more, please. Sorry, I might do a series of Let's Teach Crystal to be a Leeds fan, and it might end up with you in therapy, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah, it was a cup final. Was it a cup final? It was a cup final. Oh yeah, we were in an FA Cup final, and they technically beat us, but that means like in a physical sense as well as a footballing sense.
Right.
So on the subject of the playoffs, we've discussed the concept of playoffs a fair bit. You've learned from general conversations with me that I'm not a fan of them. How's the general playoff pasts been for the 49ers? Are we winning enough matches? Are we just having a bad
Yeah.
time?
Playoffs for us have been something that we're actually pretty good at. I feel like so this past season, obviously, we ended up going to the Super Bowl, which is like huge. But what we did too is that because we played so well throughout the season, we locked up the number 1 seed, and we were able to basically have a bye for the first round of the playoffs, which is really big. A lot of people say they don't like the bye because you can be rusty when you come back. If you're on a run and you're doing really well, you want to keep that momentum going. So it can sometimes hinder teams. We're not one of those teams. I feel like we've never been bounced from the playoffs in the first game that we've played. We've always been able to at least make it through that, especially in the last four of the 5 years. We've been able to get almost all the way to the end. So our playoff games have been great. We typically take out either the Packers, the Green Bay Packers, or the Dallas Cowboys. Those are 2 teams that don't like playing us in the playoffs because whenever they see us, they do not win. They always somehow at the end, there's some kind of stinky move that they do, or they forget that the clock has run out, or they didn't spike the ball, or whatever it is, and they end up losing to us, and it's just wonderful for us. But that being said, the NFC Championship games are ones that we typically will win, but when we don't win, it's heartbreaking. So, I mean, you get all the way there, and like the playoffs, being there is already prestigious enough. Like it's hard to get into the playoffs. Some teams, I don't think they've been to the playoffs in years, like in 15, 20 years. I don't even know. We played the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game this past season, and I think it's the first time they ever went to an NFC Championship game. I don't know if they've ever even been there. They've never been to a Super Bowl. They've never won a Super Bowl. So there's teams that, our coworker, he cheers for the New York Jets. I got to put them down a little bit. These are teams that are storied losers. They just don't win. They don't make it. It's sad, but I mean, they just don't make it to the playoffs. And so for us, we have a good pass.
The thing is, he's also a Norwich fan, so I think storied loser continues into that a little
I know.
bit.
I'm sorry, David. He's going to watch this.
I'm not sorry. It's quite funny. Paul Brunt in the chat says, "Go Panthers," and losing CMC to the 49ers still hurts me deeply.
I'm wearing CMC right now. Christian McCaffrey is literally, he could play any position in offense and I think he'd destroy. He's just fantastic. He's the Swiss Army knife. He's the reason that we made it to the Super Bowl. He's just phenomenal. He carries the team on his back. He's our running back. So thank you for him. I appreciate that, Paul.
just a personal curiosity. Tight end is a euphemism, right? That's not a real position.
It is a real position.
No, it's not.
No, it is. So the tight ends are actually like, they don't do just catching the balls. They're not like wide receivers where you're down the field and you catch. You're also a blocker. And so our tight end, George Kittle, he's phenomenal at blocking. He's one of those guys that like, he'll have a 1,000-yard season where he's catching balls everywhere, but he's also pancaking guys and making sure that the guys that are running the ball or the guys that are downfield, like he'll stuff somebody in order for them to get the play. So he's fantastic. Tight ends, yeah, it is kind of a euphemism.
But yeah, it's too funny to say to be a real thing. That
Trust
can't
me,
be true.
There's a National Tight End Day that he actually started and everything too. So obviously there's things that you're thinking in your head when you hear those words, but yeah, it's the best day of the season.
We do all love a tight end. On Leeds' end with playoffs, I did a video about this a couple of days ago, and every single time we have reached the playoffs in the league, it's not gone very well. We've not won the playoffs once, ever.
Oh no.
There was the old style version of it where you would play home and away in the semi-finals and then home and away in the final. We lost that final. After home and away we drew with them, they just decided to do a third match in Birmingham, and we lost it. Every time since then has just been a little bit of disappointment. We've been very, very underwhelming.
Yeah. How does that feel? So you're optimistic regardless of the past of the playoffs?
I think the way that I've decided to look at it, because if I don't look at it this way, I will go into a spiral like I've seen many Leeds YouTubers do, is what we've got this season is a team full of players that have never been in the playoffs with Leeds. We have a manager that hasn't been in the playoffs with Leeds. And although as a club, it might feel like we're a little bit cursed, That's not the case for these players because they've not done this before. They've not been here before. And whilst they might like stumble and fall and not win, even if that happens, like it's okay because the majority of the players will be here next season. We've seen that they are vastly better than almost everyone else in the league. And let's be honest, we'll win a lot more matches next season if we're in the same league. So it'll be more fun.
Yeah.
Let's
See?
just
Silver
find
lining.
any positives. There we go.
I love it.
So, dipping into some of the questions from the chat, there was one that I saw earlier that I completely forgot to star thingy. So that's me being a little bit daft. I forgot to say, one of the owners, Radritzani, the one that sacked Marcelo Bielsa too early, I forgot to mention this. He fired him. Later that season, we lost 4-1 to a team called Bournemouth, and the owner proceeded to message a YouTuber saying that this isn't good enough. And it's like, that
doesn't seem like the thing to do.
If only there was someone whose job it is to make it good enough. You know, you could. There were ways of fixing this.
Yeah.
What else has he done? Oh, and that was the same season that every season we have 3 kits. We got home kit, an away kit, and then a third kit in case there's like any like clash or anything like that. That was the season that at least one of the kits was designed by his kid.
Oh my god!
And it's like you could have just hold on.
Nepotism, man.
How this is meant to work.
Yeah, that's
right.
Nuts.
There was a question that I have now completely lost. There we go. This is one for Crystal. Do you know any Leeds players, or is it a sort of area that you're completely lost?
I'm completely lost. I'm not going to lie. So I had the game on the other day when you told me to watch it, and I did, and I was excited to watch it. But what was happening was I was also working at the same time. And so I'm flipping between things. And the Leeds game, I had to keep completely silent. So I was watching everything that was happening, but I didn't hear the names. I have no idea. Like I need to, I think next season for sure, I'm going to go a little bit more into it because the 49ers, they actually host watch parties in Leeds. Like the actual organization will go there. I've been to 2 of them already and it's been amazing. So was it 2? Maybe no, I went to a Super Bowl party somewhere else, but in Leeds, I went to the 49ers takeover in Leeds and it was fantastic. There's so many 49ers fans in the UK and just in like specifically London, Leeds, all that area. And these guys are amazing. So I do want to get more into it because I feel like I'll have friends that will, take care of me and make me learn more about the team. And maybe I'll get out to a game. I feel like that's how I'll really start to get more into it is going to a game. I'm the type of person that I can watch things on TV any day, but it's like being there and like feeling the presence and like feeling what the fans feel. That's how I'll get a little bit more invested.
I've just had a look at the rota for the weekend. You do not have an excuse because you start on Atletico versus Celta Vigo after the end of the Leeds match. So
okay, that's Sunday then.
We're sorted. That's Sunday. Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. Perfect.
Sunday we kick off noon our time. I'm not sure what that is for you because Italy, but I don't know what the time gap is. Okay, cool.
So yeah, 1 p.m. it'll be for me.
I believe it was Connor that he messaged off the top of my head, but it might have been Lewis. I'm not entirely sure. This is one as well. A player that you will need to remember is Archie Gray, who for the majority of this season past was 17 years old, and he played almost every single game for us.
Wow, that's young.
That's very young. And the last 2 generations of his family have played for Leeds United as well. And he is one of our favourites if we can keep him for as long as we can.
Can I ask a question? Because this might sound dumb, because obviously with NFL, players that end up playing for their teams and whatnot, they come directly from college. Sometimes there's undrafted free agents and whatnot that come from wherever, but they all have some sort of playing experience. How do you get 17 years old? Where do they come from?
Okay. So what happens is in the UK, there's a lot of grassroots football culture. So you will play as a kid. I think the youngest age group I can remember playing in was under 6s or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the best of youth football, and it'll be at the age of 10 and stuff like that. Football clubs will occasionally scout youth matches and go, this kid's really good. Let's bring him into the academy. Mm-hmm. Off the top of my head, something like 1 in 100 people who get picked by an academy go to play professional football because it's that rigorous. And
oh, wow.
There's a reputation of kids that are in football academies and dedicate their entire lives to doing really well in that and then get dropped. really struggle after that because
Yeah,
it's
because
like
they
this
don't
has
have a
been their
backup
entire
plan.
lives forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a really fun way of looking at that. But yeah, that's how it goes. For the case of Archie, particularly, him having a like deep ingrained football background anyway was presumably helpful to him because all of his family could sort of teach him, okay, so these are the steps you need to take in your career, sort of thing.
Mhm.
This is what you're doing wrong. But for like working class kids in those situations, things can be like really tough. I
Right.
think when I was younger, there was someone that was like insanely good that played from my school. I'm gonna see if I can find him now because I know that he got picked up by Huddersfield's academy, but I can't remember how it went from there. I know he spent a couple of seasons playing in Scotland, for example, but
Okay.
currently he is 26, and despite being comfortably like the best player in the surrounding areas for like the entire time that I knew him, he is currently playing in like the 8th tier, I think,
Oh, that's not
something
good.
like that.
Oof.
At least he's still playing, which I guess is a good
Yeah.
thing.
Do they pay them anything in that tier?
It varies a little bit. So you get
Depending.
to the 5th tier, and that is called non-league football. The one
Mhm.
below that, you still probably get paid. Below that is like it varies depending on how good you are, sort of thing.
Right. Okay, so this is going to be a silly question too, but Wrexham, where did they begin? You obviously know Wrexham, right?
Oh, um,
Were they
they
down there? Because they're coming up, up, up.
yeah. At the time of the first of the documentaries, they were in the 5th tier, so they were still
Okay,
very
so
much
8 is
a
bad. Okay.
yeah. Eight is not good, but 8 is still vastly clear of like anyone that plays football casually. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Another comment. Tell Crystal we need to see her in a Leeds shirt next time.
I got to
The
get to a
the
game,
people have
honestly.
spoken.
Yeah. If
It
you
has
guys
to
win it
happen at
all,
some
I'll
point.
buy a jersey.
Oh,
Get myself a little Archie one. You know what? I love that story that he grew up, this is his team. I'm sure it was his dream to play for them.
yeah,
That's
I think
beautiful.
at some point he said that it's his dream to like win the Champions League with Leeds or something like that, which
Oh, well,
is a stretch
dream
given where
big,
we are at the
man.
moment, but he might as well,
Yeah.
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 Um, I think we'd agreed that if there is another watch party thing over in Leeds, I will definitely go because you are also likely to go, and I think that might be
Yes.
the time for the Leeds shirt.
Okay, perfect. Done.
We're having various conversations about the playoffs, which I'm not going to. Oh, fair enough. We'll be fine against Norwich. We can select from a wider gene pool, although six fingers can be useless at throw-ins, I suppose. I don't know if you will know the reference, but Norwich is a bunch of farmers that have a reputation for not having the widest outside of cousin relationships.
Oh no.
Um,
Oh,
Joe's in love
goodness.
with Pat Bamford. Absolutely. Pat Bamford is one of my favourite players and has been for a long time.
Does he
Um,
currently play?
he is. Lots of
Okay.
people don't like him.
Oh.
When you go to Welland Road, you must try the fish and chips opposite the main West Standard Gate. Yeah, it's pretty good chippy, to be
Okay,
fair.
but question, do they have the scales on them?
I don't know because I've not had that many opportunities to get to matches this season because work is at exactly the same time as the
Right.
matches, which
You
is
gotta
good.
book some off, man.
Although I'm sure someone can tell me what's the chippy like
Because
down there.
I won't eat it with the scales on it, but
They do not. They do not. We're in the clear. We're
oh,
good.
okay, good.
We're
Perfect.
sorted. So, next 49ers watch party. Meet up, fish and chips, Leeds kit. Perfect.
Yes, perfect. The best
Um,
weekend.
where were we? It wasn't Jack Stubbs, it was someone else. I will tell you who it was though. Is Crystal doing content? And if so, what?
Yeah, so actually, I have my own podcast. It's called Crystal Ballin'. It's kind of this play on obviously being able to predict things with the crystal ball of what's going to happen in the season. But what I do is I normally during the season I'll interview people that are the opposing team that we're playing that week. I'll talk to an analyst or a podcast or whoever about that team and just kind of get their 2 cents on their players and do a little bit of a game preview and do some fun fantasy football stuff. I'm big into fantasy football, so I actually really appreciate a lot of players around the league, which I know I'm not supposed to say, but I mean, I'm full 49ers everything, but there are certain players that have almost won me a championship in fantasy football, so I love them. But yeah, so I do that. I'm currently updating my website a little bit. It's just crystalscuor.com, but I'm going to be doing a couple of really awesome, unique pieces that I'm covering an event next week. It's called the Dwight Clark Legacy Series, and I'll be interviewing some of the quarterbacks that are on the panel and some of the players that are being honored, and then potentially, some other cool people that are going to be there that I'm not allowed to say right now. I have some insider information, which is kind of cool, but that'll all go up on there. I'll be doing some cool articles and whatnot, and content in general. I tweet a lot. So on my Twitter, I'm just at Crystalscuor, like you guys see. But yeah, I do some videos. I sometimes during the season, I'll do like victory TikToks. I don't use TikTok for it, but like I'll do like a little video where I'm being cheeky against the team that we beat. And those are always fun. So yeah, lots of content.
I love the cultural difference in how we phrase taking the piss out of the other team after they've lost, because being cheeky is a very nice way of saying shithousing. It's perfect.
Oh, I'm terrible. I can be terrible. Like I get a lot of people coming at me for some of the stuff I do, but I'm not like I do it it's tasteful, but obviously some people don't like to see, the winning team stomping on the other team, especially by using, maybe something that like that team is known for and kind of throwing it back in their face. I do that a lot. It's fun.
But all I can say to those people is it's funny, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Yes, Crystal does have her own channel. It is linked in the title of this video.
I appreciate you, baby zebra.
Nice.
You say zebra different than me too, hey? Say it again.
Yeah, zebra.
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 I love it. Do you guys call your referees zebras as well?
No. Because to be fair, because they don't wear black and white.
Oh, they don't do what we have. Okay.
It tends to be one color. So if you've got one team in black, they'll wear like bright yellow. If there's neither team, they'll just wear black. It's a bit simpler. Right. And we have several teams that have like black and white vertical striped kits, so that'd be very confusing anytime you're playing Newcastle.
True.
There is ongoing conversation about the fish and chips. Apparently they do amazing fish cakes. I lived in Norwich for a year, and 3 different people told me their parents were cousins.
Oh. Oh man.
Brilliant. And you have another subscriber, which is very nice.
So nice.
Honestly, with the optimism thing, I have been trying to form like a real wholesome like community going on here, and it's really nice when everyone comes together a bit. If anyone has any more questions, pop them in the stream now. We'll keep going for a couple more minutes just to sort of keep things rolling. Ask Crystal, Super Bowl again for the new season?
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
So I say that with all of my heart. Like everything in me is like, okay, we're bringing back all our dogs, all these guys that are, big difference makers for us. We just drafted this incredible wide receiver out of Florida, Ricky Purcell. I'm so excited.
That's another euphemism. That has to be a wide receiver.
Yeah, I know. Some of the names, I feel like they were drunk when they thought of these names. But honestly, like he's a kid that I think with Brock Purdy, with our quarterback, he's going to connect really well. He'll have those long bombs, and it's just going to be incredible. We were missing something like that. We've also drafted a couple guys that I think will really help clean up our offensive line. The offensive line are the guys that protect our quarterback. And so giving him more time in the pocket, being able to make decisions and everything, and, not get blitzed, not get like frazzled or under pressure, that's huge. The games that we were under pressure, we still did really well, but I can't even imagine if we tighten it up a bit. I think we'll go back no problem. And this next year, we're going to win the whole thing. Hand on my heart, it's going to happen. You heard it here first, people.
Fantastic. Degenerate Yellow says, I'm not wholesome in the slightest either. That is, to be fair, because your name is Degenerate. That's what else are we expecting?
On brand.
We got another question, and this one I'm going to preface with the fact that we both work for a sports broadcaster primarily covering football matches.
Yes.
That is the majority of what we do. Do you know how offside works?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I would hope so, because...
Can I also say, so I grew up an Udinese fan because both my parents are Italian. My dad was born and raised in the Udine area. Like he lived there his whole life up until he moved to Canada. So my team is Udinese. They are at the point where they potentially could go down. They might get relegated into Serie B, which is terrible. But I've definitely listened to, I think my entire life growing up as a child, my dad screaming at the TV, that was not offside. They did not have VAR back then. So it wasn't a thing that we could go and look at it. It was just like whatever the ref decided to do, that was it, right? And so you can imagine there were a lot of Sundays that we had to deal with a very grumpy father. But yeah, I definitely know how offsides work.
I just had to make sure that Udinese wasn't one of the teams that was now owned by an ex-Leeds owner, because I had something in my head that was like, surely there's something there.
But it's not.
No, apparently not.
Okay.
And that's a good thing for you, because all of our previous owners, not great.
Yeah, they would take us down to
Crystal.
Serie B.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, C, why not? When does the NFL season start, and are there matches every week?
Yes, so the NFL season starts. I know that we play our first match September 8th. I'm already doing a countdown. There's 18 weeks to go until we get to there. I do it every week. I'm so excited for NFL season. So yeah, the first game of the season is always on the Thursday night before the Sunday, where all the games kick off. And so typically the team will play at least once a week unless you're on a bye week. There's 18 regular season games, or 18 weeks, in the season. And out of those, we only have one bye week. So your team plays every single week except for 1 week, and then get to kind of rest up a little bit. That bye week is determined when the schedules are released. You kind of get to see where your rest is going to be. Some teams get it almost right at the beginning. Other teams get it closer to the end. Depends how you look at it. Like, sometimes it's more helpful than others to be, in and around the beginning or the end, depending if some of your players go down early, whatever. But yeah, so every week we have a game. It's very exciting for 18 weeks, but then after that, it's really sad to wait. Like right now, it's been a very long off season so far, and we still got a lot of time to go. We're not even at the 120 mark yet. I think 120 days. So we're getting there. 18 weeks.
Another inspiration for you to support Leeds then is the turnaround between seasons is something like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. And in the middle of it, you got international football as well, which is
Nice.
terrifying.
Yeah.
You could organise a typical
that's just
tailgate
pain all
party
the
in the
time.
West Stand. I don't know if we could organise a tailgate party in the West Stand, because the club wouldn't like me very much if I did that. And since they've let me in the press areas once or twice, I don't want to lose that. That was quite
I
nice.
could do the hosting, and then maybe you just show up in a disguise.
I just rock up like
Yeah.
okay, I like it.
Yeah.
We don't call them zebras. We usually call them a profanity. Very good point.
Yeah.
You have another subscriber, which is very nice. Sorry if this question sounds horrible, but do you still watch when you know the smart thing is for your team to lose? Because I can't do it being a... How do you mean?
Oh, Redskins. Wait, Skins? Are you talking about Redskins or Commanders? They've changed their name. We're not allowed to call them Redskins anymore.
It's a little bit hate crimey. Yeah.
Yeah. Do I still watch when you know the smart thing? Okay. I always watch. And so you have to think, I live in Italy right now. My team is a West Coast team. We get a schedule where typically the games are either going to be on at the earliest is 7 p.m. for me here in Italy. Then there's the mid ones that are like 10:30. And then there's the primetime game that's 2:20 a.m. And I have stayed up for every single game that has happened since I've lived here for almost 3 years now. So I've not missed a single game. Even if it's the primetime game, I stay up for all of them. I have a baby girl that she just turned 1. So it was kind of easy. She had some nights that weren't the greatest, and it was already games were on, and I was already up with her. So it was perfect. But yeah, no, I will watch every single game. Even if you know it's not going to be a good outcome, like I have to watch. I have to.
I've gotten way too familiar with that feeling of having to watch even if you know it's not going to work out for you. Where was I looking? I don't know. I was going to bring up one of the comments. Watford, who are also in a little bit of trouble. Their owner also owns Udinese, so that makes quite a lot of sense to me.
This makes a lot of sense now too, because Watford is my dad's other team. He's like, they're my team on that side. So, the poor guy, he's just struggling right now.
Yeah, he's not having a great time. They're in the same league as us. Like, just tell him to support us. It's easier. It's a lot less depressing, you know?
Yeah, he just likes the pain, I think. I don't know.
That's not good. The Pozzo family are like Chelino and Rads rolled into one. The Watford fans hate them. That's not good. That's not good in the slightest.
I don't know what this means, but
they were our bad owners. Let's not start organizing a party. It's not going to work out well for us. But with that, I think it's a good-ish time to bring the stream to a close, because I said it might be like 15 minutes, half an hour, and we went on significantly longer than I thought. I'm sorry about that.
I knew it was going to be an hour. Don't worry. I've allotted the time for it. It's all good.
whilst we were talking, I decided to pop up a poll, which was, do you want to see Crystal back at some point? And overwhelmingly, yes.
Yay!
The Leeds fans like you. Whether or not you like Leeds after the playoffs, we'll find out. But it would be fantastic to have you back at some point talking
For
things
sure.
like 49ers recruitment, because we're going into the transfer window now. Anything at all, to be honest. It's nice having people on to have a chat with. So yeah.
It was fantastic. I appreciate you having me on, and everyone was so nice in the chat. Thank you guys for the subs. I'm very excited. I have some cool stuff I'm working on that I'll have up hopefully within the next week or two. So stay tuned.
Fantastic. And things that are coming on my channel almost entirely depend on what is going on with Leeds United for a while. If we lose in the playoffs, oh boy, I'm going to try and stay optimistic. If we win in the playoffs, we're going to have a party.
Nice.
I hope you enjoyed watching. If you have, please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It's just massively appreciated. You could even become a channel member, because all that revenue right now is going to Prostate Cancer UK, as it has been for quite a while now. I've got a big announcement at the end of the season about that, but we'll get into it. Yeah, hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to me, subscribe to Crystal, and I will see you later.